Tonight we'll have a meetup that's organized by two groups. One is More Electronics organizing the group Coders Kitchen, which meets every month or two talking about general IT topics. Another one is Golang, which is a Golang user group. Because tonight we talk about Golang, introduction to Golang. Also, More Electronics is sponsoring this event, so it's providing drink and pizza. And after we finish, you're invited to stay, have some pizza, and socialize and have a chat about IT topics or other topics. Also, if anybody is looking for work, More Electronics is looking for people always, so you can talk to me or Mladen there. So here we go.
Okay, so thank you all for coming. I hope that you are going to like this meeting and this introduction to Golang. So I need to present myself. My name is Jakov Kusic. I'm a software developer. My primary language is Java. I'm not mainly Golang developer. I only work on some relatively small project in Golang. So I'm, let's say, a junior in Golang, but in Java I'm a mid developer. So I'm going to show you some quick introduction to this programming language, which is always growing and which is getting stronger every day. So basically I'm also going to compare it a little bit with Java, which is my primary language and which I know much better. So basically I'm going to show some simple code samples in which I'm going to explain how does this language work. And of course this is not a complete tutorial, but I'm going to provide you some links in which you can find, if you find this lecture interesting, then you can go to those links and then you can learn it by yourself. So firstly we are going to start with one unordinary question. So what happens when you find a date on the Badoo and take an Uber to go on a date? So but nobody does know what is the answer to this question. Maybe you are going to find the love of your life, or maybe you are going to find some psychopath. But the thing is that used two main applications which were written both in Golang. So Golang is getting stronger every day. So it is used by some famous companies. You can say it's used by the Docker, Kubernetes, Heroku, YouTube, Nokia, etc. But the main company about the Golang is the Google. So basically the word Go comes from the Google, and Golang was invented in the Google company. So we are getting the TOB index of the Golang. TOB index, for those who doesn't know, is the index which is calculating approximately the percentage of usage of this language between all other languages in the world. So currently it is having around 1%. But as I was checking the market and I was checking with my friends, the demand for Golang developers is growing every day, especially since the crypto came into strength like 2-3 years ago. And I'm going to explain why the demand for Golang is growing, and maybe this TOB index is not a good representation of the value and the future potential of this language. So let's say a little bit about the history. It's a relatively new language. It's 13 years old. Compared with Java, which is my primary language. Java appeared in 1995. Also, JavaScript was found in 1995, and some other languages which are also now popular, like Python. Python is founded in 1991, and C and C++ are much older than that. So, as I already said, Golang was designed by the Google, and the thing is that the designers were Robert Grisham, Rob Pike, and Ken Thompson. And the current version is 1.19, 1.3, and that's not relevant at the moment. When you're checking those designers, maybe some of you which are a little bit familiar with the history of the programming know about this name. So Ken Thompson is one of the most influential programmers in the history, and he is the person which was the most influential person in developing of the Unix operating systems, and it also helped Dennis Ritchie in developing C, because Ken Thompson, he developed B language, and B language is the language which is not used anymore, but is the language from which C language originated. So the designers were primarily motivated by the shared dislike of C++. I'm going to say just one quote. Bjarne Stroustrup, the person which invented the C++, once said that he knows only 80% of the C++. That's a sentence which is just telling you how complex is C++, and if Bjarne Stroustrup knows only 80% of C++, it means that ordinary developer knows less than 50%, so it's hard to develop. And there are some advantages of Golang. Firstly, it's static typing. For you who doesn't know that, it means that you have to explicitly declare a variable, and you're also having some compile time protection, which I'm going to explain later, and it's also having some runtime efficiency like C. Readability and usability is like Python and JavaScript. That's basically telling you that the simplicity of this language, or at least the syntax of this language, is relatively similar to Python and JavaScript, which is much more simpler and much more easier to read than the C++. And high performance networking and multiprocessing is the reason why Golang is growing every day, because it can handle a lot of requests, it can handle a lot of load, and that's why companies which need performance are starting to use it much more. So I'm going to tell you about some advantages and disadvantages of this programming language. First one is speed. One of the reasons why it is very fast, because it's compiled directly to the machine code, and on the other hand, Java, which is also a very fast language, is compiled to the byte code. Easy to learn. Syntax, and to just start working in this language, it is easy to start, but to become an expert like in any other programming language, it's not so easy. But I'm going to tell you that when I started to work in Golang, it took me only a few days from zero knowledge to start contributing to some Golang project. It's comprehensive. Basically, it means that you can do in Golang whatever you need. The concurrency is maybe the biggest advantage of the Golang. Most companies which are need in a lot of concurrent code are starting to use Golang, because its support for concurrency is pretty high. And since the new version, like a few months ago, it has generics which are very similar to Java generics. I'm going to explain them later, and you're going to check them. Like in Java, it's also having garbage collection, and it is supported by Google. And even though the community of Golang is not so strong, basically the thing that it's supported by Google is enough that this language can be respectable. And also scalability is one of the big advantages, which I'm also going to explain a little bit later. Okay, so there are some disadvantages of this language. First one, it's a young language. Java is 14 years older than Golang. Since it's 14 years older, it means that it has much more experienced developers, and some issues which Java had were fixed even more than 14 years ago. So I hope that Golang is going to become much stronger in next years. Just to illustrate, Java, as I already mentioned, was set alive in 1995, and some Lambda functions and the streams were brought in Java in 2014. It means that those things were brought in Java when Java was 19 years old. And Golang is now only 13 years old. So maybe it's having some important features which are going to be brought in Golang in next years. So of course, like in any static type languages, it has less flexibility. And since I'm going to explain the point number 4, it takes more planning and effort to write tests than Java. So basically, you need to be very careful how you are going to write the code. If you don't write it on the right way, it's not possible to test it in Java. It's much easier to write the tests, unit test, but in Golang you need to be very, very careful how do you write the code. If you don't structure it well, then you won't be able to test it. And also the point number 5, no mainstream framework. So basically, no mainstream framework, a lot of people think it's a big disadvantage. Imagine just Java without Spring. You basically, or Java Enterprise, you cannot imagine it. But the thing is, maybe we should remove the no mainstream framework from the disadvantages, and I'm going to explain this now. So this person here, which you can see on the picture, it's Ken Thompson, one of 3 creators of Golang. But I hope that you remember it's also a creator of Unix. And Unix has some philosophy and some principles which are embedded into its core. And some of the points of the Unix philosophy are: small is beautiful, make each program do one thing well, choose portability over efficiency. So basically it means, if you check all those points, it means that imagine that you are having one framework. It's a robust, and if you want to switch also from that framework to some other framework, it's not so portable. You need to change a lot of things, and it is doing a lot of things well, but it's not so decoupled. Imagine that there is no framework. You wouldn't have all those issues. So this is a Golang philosophy and Golang approach. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just telling what its idea behind Golang. They believe if you are not having a framework, at the beginning you are going to spend much more time, but after the time passes, you are going to spend much less time than when you are having a framework, because you are not needed to upload the newer versions of the framework. If that framework gets obsolete or deprecated, almost like OSGI in Java, it's not a problem. It's a problem in Java, for example, if you are having OSGI framework, then transfer it to Spring Boot. But in Golang, you are not going to have those issues because their philosophy is not to have a framework. So now I'm going to show you some syntax overview. So basically it's relatively similar to C, and I will also add that it's also relatively similar to JavaScript. End of line semicolons are optional. They are not optional in C, but they are optional in JavaScript, so it's more similar to JavaScript. And variable declaration is a little bit strange compared to some other programming languages. For example, here you are having a var s string, and the type of the variable is declared after the name of the variable. In most of the languages, the type of the variable is set before the name of the variable. And also, it's having the declaration by initialization, which you don't need to specify the type, which is this s colon equals hello. It means that s is a string, of course. Type conversion must be explicit, so basically if s is a number, you cannot implicitly convert it to string. You need to use some functions like str, which are going to explicitly convert it to string. And the visibility is controlled by capitalization. Capital foo is not equal to foo which is not capital. In Java, you are using the keywords like private, public, and package. Protected, I'm sorry. And in Golang, you are not using that. You are controlling it by capitalization. So to make it simpler, capital foo is similar to public, and foo which is not capital is similar to private. So basically you cannot use not capital foo in other modules. There are some interesting things about the Golang language. Unused variables are compilation error. In most of the languages they are not, but according to my opinion this is a very good feature, because if it is a compilation error, then it's going to prevent you from writing a lot of trash in your language, and it's going to make your code cleaner. Unused import directives are also, the import directives in Golang are similar to import directives in Java. So basically in Java you can have unused imports. It's going to compile well, but some quality checkers like Sonar are going to complain about it. But here the compiler is going to also complain about it. There are no classes. Go is a procedural language, but okay, there are no classes, but there are some things which are similar to classes like structs. So technically you can make objects. There is no overloading, that's why I said it takes much more planning to write a good code in Golang rather than in Java. Also there is no inheritance, and Golang has visible pointers. Every language is using pointers, but it's hidden. In Golang it's not hidden. And about the control structures, a lot of languages have much more control structures. Most of them have at least while, but Golang is only having if, else, for, and switch. And that's all. And I'm going to explain you each. So basically we are here having a simple if statement. If v equals mat POW means, like in any other language, potential, and the mat is a package which needs to be imported at the start of the file in Golang. And then it's checking if v is less than the limit, then we return v. Else we are going to print some statement. So I'm just showing the syntax of if statement in Golang. Of course it can be written in some other ways, but it is the most common way. Also, if you are checking this keyword FMT is the most famous package in Golang which is used for printing, and it has a vast support, and it is used on the most of the projects. So this is a for loop. This is the full standard. The first one, I is declared by 0. If I is less than 10, I++, and then the sum is increased. The thing is that the first part and the third part are they have default values. Actually, everything has default values here. So in the second case, the first part, sum equals to 0, is not implicitly set to 0 because it's using the default value. You don't need to explicitly declare it. And sum plus plus, or the third part, is also here hidden, and by the default is sum plus plus. And also there is a third case in which nothing is written. That's infinite for loop, and as you already know, you can only exit it with some break or something like that. Okay, so this is the switch statement. This is similar like in all languages. I don't need to explain nothing here. So it's using the time package, which also needs to be important. It's just checking something. So basically switch case is the same like in all languages. It has the cases and it has the default. One thing which you can notice, it doesn't have to use the break statement like in older versions of Java. It is using the break by default. So there are some types in Golang. As you can check, Boolean It's bool, like in all languages. And the numeric is having some relatively strange names. It's 8-bit uint till 64 unsigned integer, and it's having also integer from 8 to 64, float 32, 64. And the thing is that those numbers which are declaring the number of the bits are not so common in the most of the languages, but they are set up here in Golang. String is a string. I don't need to explain nothing here, the same like in other languages. Array, I'm going to explain it a little bit later, like the slice and the map. And also struct is, if you were using C, then you know what is a struct. I'm also going to explain it later. Pointer also. Function is the function like in all other languages. So interface is the interface like in Java. And the channel is unique for Golang, and channel is used for transferring the data between threads. So array is number sequence of elements of a single type. Since there is no inheritance in Golang, you can use only one type of array. You need to be explicit in that one type, and it has a fixed size, so you cannot increase it or decrease it. And they are one-dimensional, but they can be combined to multiple dimensions, like in other languages. And here are some ways of declaring declaring the arrays. So you can just check it. I don't need to read it. I think that you understand it. Okay, slice is a little bit, let's call it more advanced array. It's not immutable. Basically, you can change the data. You can add or remove data in the slice. Slice is not exactly the same as the list in Java, but to simplify it, let's say it's some kind of a list collection in Java. It is also one-dimensional, but you can declare it to have more dimensions. It's always associated once it is initialized with underlying array, and there are a few ways of creating a slice. The first way is using the keyword make. Keyword make is the keyword which is used in Golang. It is characteristic for Golang. It is used for creating new things in Golang. Also, there is new, like in other languages, and there is implicit declaration, like I was mentioning before. Okay, there are maps the same like in other languages. It has hash table implementation in Golang. Also, like in other languages, provides fast lookup for the given key. The map is also the key value pair. Key can be any part which is comparable, which is simple, and value can be any type, including another map. So yes, like nothing different than the maps in Java, basically. The order is not guaranteed, and they are not saved for the concurrent use. If you want to do something concurrent, then you better use array or slice. And here is the syntax of map. As you can check, as you can see here, make a map string integer. So string is key and integer is value. And you can check that how the elements are added to the map. So the syntax for creating a new empty map is maybe different than in other languages, but still you just need to learn it, and that's all. Okay, structs are basically some kind of, let's call it a change for the classes. Those you who are familiar with C language are very familiar with the structs. And there is one interesting thing for the Java developers. Only fields can be defined inside a struct. But there is a catch which I'm going to explain a little bit later. So the type vertex struct. So basically we are creating a let's call it a new type, which is only having two fields, and this is the way of initializing, let's call it, this is laser. So this is the way of initializing this type vertex. So there are also functions in Golang, like in all other languages, they are not so different. They can return multiple values, and you can also return an address of the local variable. One of the reasons why pointers are used in Golang is because when you are having a large object, it's much more efficient to return just an address of that object rather than the whole object, because you are transferring just one small piece of data rather than the whole data, and when you transfer the address, then it's easy to get object on the place where you need it. And there is one thing which is interesting in Golang. It's also similar to some classes in JavaScript. Functions can be attached to a struct or interface. So here this is just a simple function which is returning the file pointer, and I'm going to explain pointers a little bit later, and this is the address of the pointer, nothing special. And also what you can check here, that in most of the languages the null is the null, and here is nil. But the thing is that here the print function is attached to vertex struct. So basically here the print function belongs to a vertex. If we go back, we can see that this is a vertex, and here we are attaching a function to a vertex. So basically this is the way of attaching the functions to the structs. As we can check here, only fields can be defined inside a struct, not function. But the functions, they can be defined outside of a struct. For Java developers, it might be a little bit confusing, but when you write a few functions, you are going to get used to it very fast. And this is the way how to call the function which is attached to a struct, like in any other language. Nothing to explain here. Okay, so there are also interfaces. Interfaces are basically the same like in Java, but of course you cannot declare static fields and default functions. In them you can only declare the abstract functions, and that's all. And this is the most simple interface. ToString is the name of the function, so this is a return variable. As you can also check, the return variable, the return type is put after the function name and the arguments. And one type can implement multiple interfaces, and basically everything is else like in other languages. But there is one interesting thing about the interface implementation. For the Java developers, if you want to implement an interface, you need to use the keyword implements. So that keyword is the keyword which is explicitly implementing the interface. And then, if you implement that interface, you need to provide an implementation to the abstract methods. Here we are having the duck typing. So basically, if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. Maybe technically this can be, if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it can be maybe a Donald Trump put in some duck uniform which is trying to pretend like a duck. But in 99% of the cases, this is going to be a duck. So what I'm trying to say, that if you are having some interface with some methods, if some struct is only using the methods, if it's only implementing the methods without explicit declaration, then it means that struct is implementing the interface. Okay, so here we are having the embedding, which is more similar, which is the most similar to the some kind of composition in other programming languages. This is technically part of composition, and it's a little bit kind of inheritance. So we are having reader-writer interface, and reader-writer type, we are just using the composition by this way. Nothing complex, this is very easy to understand, so basically I think that new programmers to Golang are not going to have an issue with this. Okay, so channels and Go routines, that's the one thing which is the most characteristic for the Golang. Channels and Go routines are not so used in other languages. Of course, there are some similar things to channels and Go routines are used. So basically, what is a Go routine? Go routine is a lightweight concurrent function like thread. In the Java, you're having some classes and some interface which you need to use if you want to use multi-threading. Explicitly multi-threading, of course. If you are doing Java, just by having garbage collection, you are doing the multi-threading, because garbage collector is a daemon thread which is always running behind the real code. But here you just need to use this keyword Go routine, and it's a declaring of a new thread. And most of the people which are explicitly using multi-threading are agreeing that these Go routines and the channels are removing the complexity of thread management, because basically you are just having two things and you don't need to use a lot of implementations and classes like in other languages, and you just need to learn those two things. And as I already mentioned before, channels are used for communicating between the Go routines, and they can be buffered or unbuffered. So here is some simple example. So here we're having here a main function. There is an A which is array. Then we are having a channel which is an integer channel. It means that integers are going to be transferred between two Go routines. And here we are having two Go routines. They are started by the keyword Go. It is similar to thread start in Java. And we are here just declaring the function. And inside the arguments, we are also declaring the channel which is going to be used to communicate between those two Go routines. And here you just declare it, and those two Go routines or those two threads are started from these two lines. And here we are specifying the channel or the communication between two threads, and here we are just printing. So basically, those two things are the only things which you need to learn if you want to use multi-threading in Golang. Of course, multi-threading is not so easy. You need to spend some time to learn those characteristics, but like not in other languages, you're just combining a few keywords, and that's all. Okay, so this is a new thing. I think this is even from this year, the generics. According to my opinion, this is the thing which is the major improvement in the newer versions of Golang, because as you already know, generics are making much simpler to make code reusable, and you don't need to write a lot of functions for every type. So they're relatively similar to generics in Java. So here we are having a comparable k variable, and it needs to be comparable. V needs to be integer 64 or float 64. So the thing is, do you know if this V can be integer 64? Can it be integer 32? What do you think? Yes or no? So the thing is, it cannot be integer 32 because there is no inheritance in Golang. And it also cannot be float 64, so basically this V can be either this or either this. And K can be only comparable. So basically we don't need generics if we are having only one type. And this is the way of using the generics. This is the V, and this is the type. So basically, like in Java. Okay, so we are coming to the pointers. Pointers, if you use the C, this is going to be easy for you. If you are maybe just using some languages like JavaScript, you are going to maybe spend a little bit time on learning this, but according to my opinion, every computer scientist or programmer needs to know pointers, because that's the way how the computer works. Each object has an address. So this is declaring just an ordinary variable. It has some value, and here we are giving to this value p. We are giving the address of this. So basically, if we print all those things, we are going to get the following results. Epsilon is 458, like here. This is very simple. Here, the value, the address of epsilon, we are having the address of epsilon, and since this address of y is added to, put to the value of p, we are also having the address here. So basically, those pointers might be scary for some unexperienced developers, but if you spend a few days, they are going to be easy for you. So we are coming a little bit to the end. So let's tell you how to start with Golang. It has official documentation on this website. This is the official website of Golang. And this is not just ordinary documentation. This is just some kind of a live tutorial in which you are having some code samples and need to solve some task. And according to my opinion, it's better just to having a written documentation. Of course, you are also having written documentation here, but this tutorial is also having some, as I already mentioned, it's also having some coding samples which you need to solve, and after you pass this tutorial, you are going to have some knowledge of Golang, according to my opinion, enough, if you already know how to program, to start working on some project. On the YouTube there are 1 million tutorials, but this is one of the best, and on Udemy of course there are a lot of lectures, but this one is pretty good. It has the most grades, and the average grade is 4.8, which is much better than 99% of the tutorials in general. So I would recommend definitely to start with this one, then this one, and if you find Golang interesting, then buy this tutorial for 10-12 euros. And I can assure, if you already know how to do programming, you are going to be able to come to some project and start working immediately. So there are some ideas. I tried 3 of them. The Golang, it's by far the best, but unfortunately it's not free. It is developed by the JetBrains, the Czech company, which is also developing IntelliJ IDEA. So if you use IntelliJ IDEA, you are going to know how to use Golang. And VS Code and the Sublime, I suppose that you know that if you use them, you need to adjust a lot of things. And they are pretty decent for developing Golang applications, but Golang is the best. You are having 1 month free trial, and there is no community version like in IntelliJ, and yearly license is 199 euros. But if you are going to develop something professional, I would definitely recommend Golang, because 200 euros per year is not a big price, and it's going to save you a lot of time. So there is the question, why are Golang developers more paid than Java developers if Golang is so simple? So the thing is, if you are having a lot of friends in programming, and you are maybe heard that Golang developers are more paid, that there is a bigger demand for Golang developers, and I'm going to explain you why is this let's call it true. First one is speed. Java is fast. It's one of the fastest languages, but especially the newer versions of Java. But Golang is a little bit faster. You can check here, it's maybe 50% faster, and it's significant if you are dealing with a large amount of data. The second reason is it needs less computing power. It's not having JVM, which is very powerful, but also very robust. And you don't need so much computing power, and the same exe file of Golang compared to same exe file of Java is having taking much less megabytes. So since Golang is 14 years younger than Java, there are of course less experienced developers. Since there are less experienced developers, there is a higher demand for them. But maybe the biggest reason why the Golang developers are more paid than the Java developers, a lot of applications which are using Golang are demanding explicitly writing concurrency. And most of Java jobs are not demanding explicitly writing concurrency, and generally most of the programmers are not so good in concurrency. And the thing is that they need to be very, very fluent in this if they want to work on those complex applications. And I also want to say that if Java application is also demanding a lot of explicitly written concurrency, then also the salary will be at least equal to the salary of the Golang developers. Of course, there is much less support and third-party tools, so you'll need to have a lot of knowledge, even more knowledge than in Java, because just to start on the project, you can start immediately. But if you want to be really good and develop some scalable and really good applications in Golang, you need to have more knowledge. No mainstream framework, as already mentioned, it's maybe not advantage, maybe it's an advantage, but still if there is no framework, there are no predefined things, and you need to know how to develop everything by yourself. So just to sum up, Golang developers with the same knowledge as the Java developers are not more paid, just the Golang is in demand for more experienced developers. The average developer which is demanded for a Golang project needs to be more experienced and better than the average developer which is demanded for a Java project. That's the reason. So if you are good in any language, you are going to have approximately the same salary. So at the end, we are having the final motivations for learning Golang. I spoke too much, and here I'm just going to show one picture. Just Google this. Future Programming Languages 2030. If you Google this, you are going to check on up maybe from 10 articles in Google, you are going to find Golang at least in 8 or 9 of them. They are telling that Golang is one of top 5, top 10 languages in 2030. So I think that the increase of demand for Golang will be also in the next years. And if you become fluent in Golang, it's going to be really good.
Ask the Google search if Golang is Google's language.
Actually, that's a very good question. I was not thinking about it, but you can find it, or you can Bing this or Yahoo this, whatever you need. Okay, so thank you for your attention. I hope this was not boring. It was a little bit interesting. This was just a quick overview of Golang. I'm not an expert in Golang, as I already said, but I hope that you at least got some overview of the language, the potential advantages, and the future of this language. So, do you have any questions?
One more.
Yes.
In which areas Golang is mostly used? Blockchain?
Yes, in blockchain it's mostly used. I have a friend which is having a company, and he's always struggling to find good Golang developers. And the thing is that he's offering really good salaries, but still he's having problems to find them. And also it is used everywhere where you need a lot of speed. So that's the main motivation of Golang. If you need a lot of speed, then Golang is good. Of course, there are some languages, even newer languages like Rust, which are faster than Golang, but for the Rust you need much more knowledge than Golang. It's far more complex and the development is slower.
Rust is quite popular for blockchain.
Yes.
Golang is quite popular for microservices, cloud-native applications.
Yes, but also in blockchain. My friends which are working there are already demanding for the Golang developers. So the thing is that, Golang is also popular for microservices, but generally this language is having a future and it's going to get stronger and stronger. So
Can you build a web application?
yes, of course.
But you don't have a web framework, so you need to.
Yeah, but there are a lot of third-party tools which are enough for you to build. Just need to maybe be careful about some other stuff. Yeah, but it's not so popular.
Yeah. You use more libraries than frameworks.
Yes, more libraries than frameworks because it's easier to replace them. As I said at the beginning, one of the things is Unix philosophy, portability over something. Efficiency, yes.
I don't understand that. Why it's better to be portable than efficient?
Maybe because if you're having a long-lasting project, then it's an advantage because you can adjust it much better. But the thing is that there is a debate between those two things. But this is a Golang approach, a Golang philosophy. I'm not saying it's right, I'm just telling what is the idea behind it. Generally, I'm a Java developer and I'm probably going to also stick to Java. But Golang is definitely, as we can say, knocking on the door, and maybe in 5 or 10 years in this room there will be a few Golang developers. At the moment I believe there are 0 of them. But in the future it's going to be probably more. We don't know for certain, but there is a trend.
There's a similar saying from Ken Beck, make it work when make
Yes.
it right.
Yes, that's a thing. So other questions?
You mentioned that Go as language is 14 years old. So this animal is, I suppose, a beaver.
I think, yes, the name of this icon is called Gopher, and it's the logo of Golang.
So imagine that you have a kid 10 years old, and you need to tell it this programming language, it will be future in 10, 15
And you
years.
show this.
And you show this, it is winner. If you compare with Python, is it better to take it to Go than Python?
So the thing is that Python is having a snake, and the snake is more scary than this. But I think that Golang is, I cannot say better language, but I think it has made better future than Python, because Python is very slow language, and also we are coming to the end of the Moore's law, and the computer efficiency is not so increasing like, let's say, 15, 20 years ago. So basically, if you want to optimize something, Golang is definitely a good choice. And also forgot, Golang is also a lot of used in IoT, because it's fast and it's relatively lightweight. In my previous job, I used Python in IoT, and Python is good because it was a relatively simple application, but if you need to process more data more fastly, Python is not such a good option.
Yeah, but Python is much easier to learn.
Yes, it is, but
Always have a more community than a language.
yes, of course, but the
So,
thing is, if you are going to need speed,
yeah, but you don't need it just in some specific conditions, but in basic stuff, Python is good enough.
yes, for the basic stuff definitely, but the Golang is not meant for the basic stuff. Golang is meant for the more complex.
So it is a question if Golang will ever be popular as Python.
That's a good question, but it has tendency to grow at the moment. But anyway, we cannot predict the future. Maybe some completely new language will appear, which is going to be better than Golang in absolutely everything, so Golang is going to die. But at the moment, it has a good chance to grow in the future, like Croatia has a good chance to beat Japan in the World Cup. So it's a thing. We are not knowing for certain, but we are just having the numbers. And of course, Golang probably will never become so mainstream as Java. Maybe it's going to have 5%, but now it's only having 1%. If it comes to 5%, it's still a significant increase. So, any other questions?
There is a strategic game called Go.
Yes, it is. It's mainly, as I heard, the last game in which AI managed to beat a human, but it doesn't have any connection with it. Go is Google.
Yeah, I know.
Yes. Other questions? If not, thank you for coming. You are having a pizza.
I don't know else.
Ah, that's